The day the mute Omega was banished, no one realized they were sending away the only person who remembered a name the world had forgot. Snow drifted across the stone road in slow, silent spirals as if the sky itself had grown tired. Evelyn Hart stood alone before the towering gates of Moonridge Pack, her thin gray coat fluttering in the bitter January wind. The cold bit through the worn fabric and settled deep into her bones, but she barely felt it anymore. At 22 years old, she had spent most of her life learning how to endure things that hurt. The elders stood above her on the raised platform overlooking the courtyard. Their heavy cloaks snapped in the wind while dozens of pack members gathered behind them. No one stepped forward. No one met her eyes. Some stared at the ground. Others watched with quiet relief. Evelyn lowered her gaze to the frozen stones beneath her boots. She had seen this moment coming for years. Ever since she was a little girl who never spoke. Ever since the whispers began. Broken Omega. Moon-cursed child. Useless. The words had followed her through every season of her life. She remembered standing in crowded halls as other children laughed and played while she sat alone by the windows. She remembered trying to force sound from her throat until tears filled her eyes. Nothing ever came. Not a word. Not a whisper. The silence had become part of her. A prison she carried everywhere. Elder Marcus unfolded a parchment and cleared his throat. The sound echoed through the courtyard. Evelyn knew the speech before he even began. She had heard versions of it her entire life. Words about duty, about sacrifice, about protecting the pack, about removing burdens. She watched his mouth move while snowflakes gathered in his silver beard. The words blurred together. Around her, the crowd remained silent. A few looked uncomfortable. Most simply looked relieved that the attention was finally focused on someone else. Evelyn's fingers curled tightly around the small canvas satchel hanging from her shoulder. Everything she owned fit inside it. A wool blanket, 2 changes of clothes, a small silver pendant that had belonged to her mother. Nothing else. The winter wind swept through the courtyard again, carrying the scent of pine trees from the forest beyond the walls. For a strange moment, Evelyn felt lighter. Not happy, not hopeful, just lighter, as if a rope that had been wrapped around her chest for years had finally loosened. She had spent her whole life trying to belong here, trying to prove she mattered, trying to earn kindness from people who had already decided who she was. And now there was nothing left to prove. The heavy gates groaned open behind her. Beyond them stretched miles of snow-covered wilderness and dark forests untouched by pack law. Dangerous, lonely, unknown. Yet somehow the sight of it made her heart beat a little faster. Elder Marcus pointed toward the open road. His final words faded into the cold air. The judgment was complete. Evelyn looked back one last time. Not at the elders, not at the crowd, but at the village itself. The rooftops dusted with snow. The lanterns glowing faintly through frosted windows. The place she had called home even when it had never truly felt like one. Then something unexpected happened. A sharp pressure bloomed behind her eyes. Not pain, not fear. Something stranger. A sensation she had experienced only in dreams. Her breath caught. For the briefest moment, she heard a voice. Deep, distant, familiar. It seemed to come from somewhere far beyond the mountains. Somewhere ancient. Somewhere waiting. The voice spoke only 3 words. Not aloud. Not in the wind. Directly inside her mind. And although Evelyn had never heard that voice before, something deep within her soul recognized it instantly. Welcome back, Evelyn. She froze. The feeling vanished as quickly as it came. Snow continued falling. The crowd remained unaware. No one else reacted. No one else heard it. But as Evelyn stepped beyond the gates and began walking into the endless white wilderness, a strange certainty settled quietly in her heart. For the first time in years, she no longer felt abandoned. Somewhere beyond the frozen horizon, someone was waiting for her. And somehow, impossibly, they already knew her name. The first night alone should have terrified her. Instead, it felt strangely familiar. Evelyn walked until the last traces of Moonridge Pack disappeared behind walls of snow and towering pines. The daylight faded quickly beneath thick winter clouds, painting the forest in shades of blue and silver. Every breath formed a pale mist before vanishing into the frozen air. Her boots crunched through nearly 8 inches of fresh snow as she followed no trail except the one unfolding beneath her feet. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not stop. By sunset, Exhaustion settled heavily into her muscles. She found shelter beneath a rocky overhang overlooking a narrow stream that had not completely frozen. The water whispered softly as it slipped between sheets of ice. It was the only sound besides the distant wind moving through the trees. Evelyn wrapped herself in her blanket and sat with her back against the cold stone wall. For the first time since leaving the pack, she allowed herself to breathe without feeling watched. No judgmental stares. No disappointed looks. No whispers following her every step. Just silence. The same silence that had been her companion for 22 years. Her fingers drifted toward the silver pendant resting beneath her coat. The chain was old and slightly tarnished. Her mother had given it to her shortly before she died. Evelyn remembered that day clearly. Not because of any words spoken. There had been none. Her mother had simply smiled, placed the pendant around her neck, and touched her forehead gently, as if trying to tell her something important. Something she never had the chance to explain. Evelyn closed her eyes. Snow continued falling beyond the shelter. Minutes passed, then hours. Eventually fatigue pulled her into sleep. The dream came almost immediately. It always did. She stood in a place she had never seen before. Towering stone pillars rose into a sky filled with silver stars. Ancient symbols glowed faintly across a polished black floor that stretched endlessly in every direction. The air felt warm despite the darkness. Peaceful. Familiar. She looked down and realized she was no longer wearing her worn winter clothes. A pale silver dress brushed softly against her ankles. The strange part was not the dream itself. It was the man standing at the far end of the hall. He was always there. Every time. Tall. Motionless. Dressed in black. His face hidden beneath shadows she could never quite see through. For years he had appeared in her dreams without speaking. Without moving. Simply watching. But tonight was different. Tonight, he took a step forward. Evelyn felt her heart begin to race. Another step followed. Then another. The distance between them slowly disappeared. She wanted to run. Wanted to ask who he was. Wanted to understand why he kept appearing in her dreams. Yet as always, no sound would leave her lips. The man stopped only a few feet away. His silver eyes reflected the stars above them. Eyes she somehow recognized despite never seeing them before. He looked at her with an expression she could not understand. Not sadness. Not anger. Something older. Something that felt like longing. Then he raised one hand. Slowly. Carefully. As if reaching towards someone he had searched for a very long time. The moment his fingers almost touched hers, a sharp sound echoed through the dream. A distant bell. Deep and ancient. The entire hall trembled. The man's expression changed instantly. For the first time, fear flashed across his face. He spoke a single word. Evelyn could not hear it. Yet somehow she felt it. The sound wrapped itself around her mind like a forgotten memory struggling to return. She woke with a sudden gasp. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees. The stream still flowed beside her shelter. Snow sparkled across the forest floor. Everything appeared normal. Yet her heart continued pounding. Because this time the dream had left something behind. Not a voice. Not an image. A feeling. A certainty. Somewhere beyond these endless woods existed a man she had never met. And somehow, impossibly, he had been searching for her too. 3 days passed beneath an endless canopy of snow-covered trees. Evelyn followed the winding stream deeper into the wilderness, moving farther from every place marked on pack maps. The forest seemed older here. The pines grew taller. Their trunks were thicker than any she had ever seen, some stretching nearly 100 feet toward the pale winter sky. Even the air felt different. Colder. Quieter. As though the world itself was holding its breath. She survived on berries preserved beneath frost, clean water from the stream, and the few supplies she had carried from Moonridge. Each night, she slept beneath natural shelters formed by stone outcroppings and ancient roots. Each night the same dream returned. The same hall. The same stars. The same man. And each night, he came a little closer. On the morning of the 4th day, Evelyn awoke before sunrise. A strange uneasiness lingered in her chest. The dream had ended differently. She could not remember every detail, but one thing remained clear. The man had almost spoken again. Almost. She sat beside a small fire built from fallen branches and watched the first light creep across the snow. The forest glowed silver and gold. Steam curled from her tin cup as she warmed water over the flames. Everything seemed peaceful. Then she heard it. A whisper. Evelyn froze instantly. The sound had not come from the trees. It had not come from the wind. It had come from inside her mind. She slowly stood and turned in a circle. Nothing moved beyond the firelight. The forest remained silent. Yet the whisper came again. Soft, distant, almost impossible to understand. Her heart began to pound. For years she had lived in silence. Now silence itself seemed to be speaking back. The voice disappeared before she could make sense of it. Evelyn waited several minutes. Nothing followed. Eventually she convinced herself it had been imagination. Fatigue. Loneliness. The mind could play strange tricks when left alone for too long. She gathered her belongings and continued north. The terrain gradually changed throughout the day. The stream widened into a river nearly 30 feet across. Strange stone formations emerged among the trees. Some appeared natural. Others looked carved. Evelyn paused beside one partially buried beneath snow. The stone stood nearly 6 feet tall. Weathered symbols covered its surface. She brushed away frost with her glove. Her breath caught. She recognized the markings immediately. They were identical to the glowing symbols she had seen on the floor inside her dreams. A chill traveled through her body that had nothing to do with winter. Evelyn traced one symbol carefully with her fingertips. The moment she touched it, another whisper echoed inside her mind. This time it was clearer. Not words. A feeling. A memory that did not belong to her. She saw moonlight reflecting across black stone. A crown forged from silver branches. Countless stars turning above an ancient throne. The vision vanished instantly. Evelyn stumbled backward. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Snowflakes drifted around her while the forest remained impossibly still. She looked again at the stone marker. It stood alone among the trees as though waiting for someone to find it. For a long moment, she simply stared. Then something caught her attention. Beneath the ancient symbol was a smaller marking nearly hidden beneath years of weather and ice. It resembled a crescent moon intertwined with a wolf. The sight stirred a strange familiarity deep within her chest. She knew she had never seen it before. Yet somehow she felt connected to it, drawn toward it. As twilight settled across the forest, Evelyn continued forward. The stone marker disappeared behind her, but the feeling remained. Every step seemed to pull her towards something waiting beyond the next ridge, beyond the next valley, beyond the next snowfall. And as darkness descended over the wilderness, the whisper returned one final time. Faint, patient, unmistakably real. This time she understood a single word. Home. The word lingered in Evelyn's mind long after the whisper faded. Home. It should have meant Moonridge. It should have brought memories of familiar roads and warm lights behind frosted windows. Instead, the feeling pointed somewhere else entirely. Somewhere she had never seen. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Sunlight spilled across the snow like liquid gold, transforming the endless wilderness into a sea of diamonds. Evelyn followed the river north as she had for days, but now she noticed something different. The forest itself seemed to be changing. The ancient pines gradually thinned, replaced by towering white birches whose silver bark shimmered in the sunlight. Strange birds circled high overhead. She had never seen their kind before. Their feathers flashed shades of pale blue and silver as they glided silently through the sky. By afternoon, she reached the base of a ridge overlooking a broad valley. Evelyn stopped to catch her breath. The climb had been steep. From this height, she could see nearly a mile in every direction. Snow-covered forests stretched endlessly beneath the winter sky. But it was not the view that captured her attention. It was what stood at the center of the valley. A massive stone arch rose from the earth like the remains of an ancient gateway. Time had worn its edges smooth. Vines frozen beneath ice clung to its surface. Yet the symbols carved into the stone remained visible even from this distance. The same symbols. The ones from her dreams. The ones from the marker she had found the day before. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She stared at the arch for several moments before beginning her descent. The closer she came, the stranger the place felt. The air seemed heavier. Not unpleasant. Simply different. As though invisible currents moved beneath the surface of the world. The stone arch stood nearly 20 feet tall. Snow drifted around its base. No footprints disturbed the untouched white blanket surrounding it. No sign suggested anyone had visited for generations. Evelyn reached out cautiously and brushed her fingertips against the cold stone. A sudden warmth spread through the pendant beneath her coat. She jerked back in surprise. The silver chain rested against her skin exactly as before, yet she could have sworn it had briefly pulsed like a heartbeat. Then a new sound reached her ears. Not a whisper this time. A voice. Real. Distant. Someone was speaking. Evelyn turned immediately. The sound came from beyond a cluster of birch trees farther down the valley. Her heart raced. She had not encountered another person since leaving Moonridge. For a moment, uncertainty rooted her in place. Then curiosity won. She moved carefully through the trees, keeping her footsteps light against the snow. The voice grew clearer. A man's voice, low and strained. She rounded a stand of evergreens and stopped abruptly. A small clearing opened before her. At its center stood a horse unlike any she had ever seen. Its coat gleamed white beneath the sunlight. Nearby, partially sheltered against a fallen log, sat a man dressed in a long black coat. His dark hair brushed his shoulders. One hand rested against the rough bark behind him, while the other gripped a leather satchel lying beside his boots. At first glance, he appeared unharmed. Then he slowly lifted his head. Even from 20 yards away, Evelyn could see exhaustion etched across his features, the kind that came from carrying burdens too heavy for too long. His eyes met hers. Silver, the exact shade she had seen in her dreams. The world seemed to stop. The winter wind fell silent. The birds vanished from the sky. For one impossible moment, neither of them moved. The stranger's expression shifted from surprise to disbelief, as though he had spent years searching for something he never truly expected to find. And somehow, against all reason, Evelyn felt the exact same thing. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched across the clearing, yet it did not feel empty. It felt charged with questions neither knew how to ask. Evelyn remained motionless among the birch trees, her breath visible in the cold afternoon air. The stranger slowly rose to his feet. He was taller than she had first realized, his dark coat brushing against the snow as he steadied himself beside the fallen log. Up close, the exhaustion in his face became even more apparent. Shadows lingered beneath his silver eyes. Not weakness, not illness, weariness, the kind carried by someone who had traveled a very long road alone. For several seconds, he simply looked at her. Not with suspicion, not with fear, with recognition, as though her appearance had confirmed something he had hoped for and dreaded at the same time. Evelyn felt the same unsettling certainty growing inside her chest. The man from her dreams. The impossible realization echoed through her mind. The shape of his face, the silver eyes, the strange familiarity that seemed to bypass logic entirely. Every instinct told her she should leave, yet her feet refused to move. The white horse nearby lifted its head and released a soft breath. The sound finally broke the stillness. The stranger lowered his gaze briefly before offering a small nod. A gesture of peace, of gratitude. Evelyn noticed then that his leather satchel lay partially open beside him. Several old maps protruded from within. The edges were worn and yellowed with age. One had slipped free entirely and rested on the snow. Strange symbols covered its surface. Symbols she immediately recognized. Her heart skipped. The same markings from the ancient stone arch. The same symbols from her dreams. The stranger followed her gaze. Something unreadable crossed his expression. Slowly, he bent down and retrieved the map. His movements were careful, almost protective. Then another unexpected thing happened. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing. The map slipped from his fingers before he could secure it. It tumbled across the snow and came to rest only a few feet from Evelyn. Instinctively, she stepped forward and picked it up. The moment her fingers touched the parchment, warmth surged through her pendant. Stronger than before. Images flashed behind her eyes. A black tower beneath a sky filled with stars. A silver crown resting upon stone. A massive doorway covered in glowing symbols. Then one final image. A man standing alone before a throne. The same silver eyes. The same dark hair. The vision vanished so quickly, she almost doubted it had happened. Startled, Evelyn looked up. The stranger was staring at her now. Not at her face. At the pendant hanging beneath her coat. His expression had changed completely. Shock. Genuine shock. He took a single step forward before stopping himself. The movement seemed almost involuntary. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the map. The pendant continued radiating gentle warmth against her skin. Neither understood what was happening, yet both knew something important had just changed. Snow drifted softly between them. The afternoon sun hung low above the valley. Then, for the first time since she had entered the clearing, Evelyn noticed something written across the top of the map. The letters were faded with age, but still visible. She could not understand most of the ancient script. Only one word stood out. One word she somehow recognized instantly. Aurelius. The name sent a strange tremor through her chest. Across the clearing, the stranger went completely still, as if that single forgotten word carried a meaning powerful enough to alter everything. The strange silence lingered after the discovery of the name on the map. Aurelius. Evelyn could not explain why it felt familiar. She had never seen the word before. Yet the moment her eyes found it, something deep inside her seemed to awaken. The stranger slowly approached, stopping several feet away. Up close, the details of his face became clearer. There was a timeless quality about him that made him seem older than he looked. Not aged, ancient, like a story that had survived long after the people who first told it were gone. His silver eyes remained fixed on the map in her hands, then on the pendant resting against her coat, then back to her face. Questions filled his expression, the same questions racing through Evelyn's own mind. A cold breeze swept through the clearing. Snow drifted from the branches overhead. The white horse shifted quietly nearby. Everything felt suspended between one heartbeat and the next. Then the warmth returned, stronger this time. The pendant beneath Evelyn's coat pulsed once, twice. A soft golden glow flickered beneath the fabric before fading again. The stranger noticed it immediately. His eyes widened slightly. For the first time since she had seen him, genuine emotion broke through his calm exterior. Hope. The realization startled her. Why would a stranger look at her that way? Why would a simple pendant matter? Before either of them could react further, another vision struck her without warning. The clearing vanished. The snow disappeared. Evelyn found herself standing inside a vast circular chamber illuminated by floating silver lights. Ancient banners hung from towering walls. Their symbols matched the ones carved on the stone arch and the weathered map. Hundreds of voices echoed through the chamber. She could not understand the words. Yet one phrase repeated again and again. Aurelius, Aurelius, Aurelius. The name seemed to ripple through the vision like a wave moving across water. Then she saw him, the same man standing before an enormous throne carved from black stone. He looked different, stronger, dressed in dark ceremonial armor trimmed with silver. A crown rested upon his head. Thousands of people filled the chamber below him. Their faces blurred, their voices merged together, but their attention remained fixed entirely on him. Then the vision shifted. The chamber darkened. The banners disappeared. The throne stood empty. Dust covered the floor. Centuries seemed to pass in seconds. The once great hall became a forgotten ruin swallowed by time. Yet one thing remained unchanged. The name, Aurelius. It lingered like an echo that refused to die. Evelyn stumbled backward as reality returned. Snow, trees, the clearing. Her breathing quickened. The stranger reached out instinctively as if to steady her, then stopped before touching her. His expression had grown pale. He looked as shaken as she felt. Somehow he knew something about what she had seen. The certainty settled heavily between them. Then a new sound drifted through the valley. Faint, distant, a horn. The note echoed across the snow-covered hills before fading into silence. The stranger's entire posture changed. His gaze snapped toward the northern ridge. Alert, focused, concerned. He listened carefully. A second horn answered from farther away. Then a third. Evelyn could not understand their meaning, but she immediately sensed they were connected to him. Whatever peace existed in the clearing had just ended. The stranger looked back at her. For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed his face. Then his eyes dropped to the map still resting in her hands. More specifically, to the ancient name written across its surface. Aurelius, the same name that now felt woven into both of their destinies. And somewhere beyond the distant ridges, hidden by miles of snow and forest, something had begun moving toward them. The distant horns echoed again, carried across the valley by the winter wind. This time the sound felt closer. Evelyn saw the stranger's jaw tighten slightly as he turned toward the northern ridge. Whatever he had been searching for, whatever secrets surrounded the ancient symbols and forgotten names, they were no longer hidden. Someone else was coming. The realization settled heavily over the clearing. The white horse lifted its head and pawed gently at the snow, sensing the tension in the air. Evelyn remained still, the weathered map clutched carefully in her hands. The strange visions had left her unsettled, yet another feeling was beginning to emerge beneath the confusion. Trust. It made no sense. She did not know this man. She did not know his name. Yet every instinct told her he was connected to the dreams that had followed her for years. Connected to the voice that had guided her through the wilderness. Connected to the forgotten word that now echoed endlessly in her thoughts. The stranger glanced toward her again. His silver eyes softened for the briefest moment. Then he gestured toward the stone arch rising above the valley. It was the first deliberate communication between them. He pointed to the arch, then to the map, then finally to the pendant resting beneath her coat. Evelyn followed the motion carefully. A connection. He was trying to show her a connection. Before she could fully process the thought, the pendant warmed again. Not with sudden force this time. With gentle consistency. Like a heartbeat. The sensation spread through her chest and down her arms. Snowflakes drifted lazily around them. The world seemed to fade into the background. Another memory surfaced. Not a vision. A feeling. She saw herself as a small child sitting beside a window during a winter storm. Her mother knelt before her. Smiling. Calm. Safe. Evelyn remembered the silver pendant being placed around her neck. But now a detail returned that had been lost for years. Her mother had pointed toward the pendant and then toward Evelyn's heart. Then she had formed a symbol in the air with her finger. A symbol identical to the one carved into the ancient stone markers. The memory vanished as quickly as it appeared. Evelyn blinked. Her heart raced. Her mother had known something. Something important. Something she had tried to leave behind before she died. The stranger seemed to recognize the change in her expression. Slowly, he reached into his coat and withdrew a small object wrapped in dark cloth. He hesitated before offering it toward her. Evelyn stepped forward cautiously. The object was surprisingly light. Carefully, she unfolded the cloth. Inside rested a circular silver medallion no larger than the palm of her hand. Ancient symbols surrounded a single crescent moon carved into the center. Her breath caught. The design matched the marking she had discovered beneath the stone marker in the forest. It matched the symbol from her memory. It matched everything. The moment her fingers touched the medallion, the air around the stone arch shimmered faintly. Not enough to frighten her, just enough to notice. The stranger saw it too. For the first time since they met, genuine astonishment crossed his face. The arch stood unchanged a second later, yet both of them knew they had witnessed something impossible. Then another horn sounded. Much closer now. A flock of pale birds burst suddenly from the distant treetops. The stranger's expression hardened. Not with fear, with urgency. He looked toward the ridge once more. Whatever was approaching had nearly arrived. Yet even as the danger drew nearer, Evelyn found herself staring at the silver medallion resting in her hands. Because etched along its outer edge, hidden among the ancient symbols, was another name. A name she somehow recognized before she even understood why. And the moment her eyes found it, the stranger closed his eyes briefly as if he already knew what she was about to discover. The name etched into the silver medallion seemed impossibly old. Time had nearly erased the letters, yet the moment Evelyn saw them, recognition surged through her like lightning beneath still water. Her pulse quickened. The snowy valley disappeared from her awareness. The distant horns faded. Even the cold vanished. There was only the name, waiting, calling to something buried deep inside her memory. The stranger watched her carefully. His silver eyes carried a mixture of hope and apprehension, as though he feared the answer she might discover. Evelyn traced the ancient letters with trembling fingertips. The symbols surrounding the name began to glow faintly beneath the winter sunlight. Not bright enough to illuminate the clearing, just enough to prove they were not ordinary markings. The warmth from her pendant intensified. It spread through her chest and into her throat. For a brief moment, she could not breathe. Another memory surfaced, older than any she had ever experienced. She stood within the great circular hall from her visions. Thousands of silver lights floated overhead. Ancient banners drifted gently in an invisible breeze. The throne stood at the far end of the chamber, and beside it stood the same man, not as a stranger, not as a distant figure hidden inside dreams. She knew him. Somehow she knew him. His laughter echoed through the hall. Warm, familiar, real. Then the vision shifted. The lights dimmed. Voices faded. Shadows stretched across the stone floor. Someone was speaking urgently. A woman. Her face remained hidden, yet her words carried unmistakable purpose. Protect the name. Let it disappear. Let the world forget. Until she returns. The memory shattered. Evelyn gasped silently as reality returned around her. Snow drifted through the clearing. The white horse stood motionless. The stranger had not moved. Yet everything felt different now. The name on the medallion no longer seemed unfamiliar. It felt personal, ancient, connected to every strange dream she had ever known. Another horn echoed across the valley. Closer than before, shapes appeared atop the distant ridge. Tiny figures moving against the white landscape. Travelers, riders, searching. The stranger noticed them immediately. His expression tightened. Time was running out, yet his attention remained fixed on Evelyn, waiting, almost pleading, as though everything depended upon what happened next. The warmth inside her throat intensified until it became impossible to ignore. For 22 years, silence had defined her life. Every attempt to speak had ended in failure. Every word had remained trapped behind invisible walls. But now those walls felt different, weaker, cracking beneath a force older than memory itself. Evelyn looked down at the medallion one final time. The name stared back at her. Familiar, beloved, forgotten by history, remembered by her heart. The stranger's eyes widened slightly. He knew. Somehow he knew exactly what was happening. Snow swirled around them. The stone arch shimmered faintly in the distance. The riders continued descending the ridge. And for the first time in more than 2 decades, Evelyn felt a sound rising within her. Not forced, not painful, natural. The way breathing was natural. The way remembering was natural. Slowly she lifted her gaze to meet the stranger's silver eyes. Recognition passed between them like the first ray of dawn after a long winter night. Then her lips parted. The silence that had imprisoned her for 22 years finally broke. A single word emerged into the frozen air. Soft, clear, perfectly spoken. The ancient name engraved upon the medallion. The name history had lost. The name no one living should have remembered. The stranger froze completely. His breath caught. His eyes filled with astonishment. Because the name she had spoken was not merely a forgotten title. It was his true name. The name that had vanished from the world centuries ago. The name lingered in the frozen air long after the sound faded. Evelyn stood motionless, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. For a moment she wondered if she had imagined it. 22 years of silence could not simply vanish. 22 years of failed attempts could not disappear with a single breath. Yet the stranger's reaction told her the truth. His silver eyes widened with unmistakable shock. Not because she had spoken, because of what she had spoken. Snow drifted between them in slow, graceful spirals. The distant riders continued descending the ridge, but neither of them seemed aware of anything beyond that single moment. The stranger stared at her as though he were looking through centuries of history. His expression shifted from disbelief to something deeper, something painfully human. Relief. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Another memory stirred at the edge of her mind. Not a dream, not a vision, a feeling. Waiting. Endless waiting. Searching through years that became decades. Through decades that became centuries. The emotion was so powerful it almost brought tears to her eyes. The stranger took a slow step forward. Then another. This time he did not stop. He crossed the remaining distance between them carefully, as if afraid the moment might shatter if he moved too quickly. The silver medallion remained in Evelyn's hands. Its ancient symbols glowed faintly beneath the winter sunlight. The warmth flowing from the pendant around her neck had become steady now. Calm, certain, like a puzzle piece finally finding its place. The stranger lowered his gaze briefly before looking back at her. His composure had vanished completely. Whatever mask he had worn since they met was gone. In its place stood a man carrying the weight of countless untold years. A man who had just heard the one thing he believed no living soul could ever know. Another memory flashed through Evelyn's mind. The great hall, the silver lights, the black throne. But this time she noticed something she had missed before. The throne had never been empty. Someone had always stood beside it. A young woman wearing the same pendant now hanging around Evelyn's neck. The vision disappeared before she could see the woman's face. The stranger seemed to sense something changing inside her. Slowly, almost reverently, he knelt in the snow. The motion was simple, quiet, yet it carried a significance Evelyn could not fully understand. The riders on the ridge had reached the valley floor now. Their figures grew larger against the white landscape. Still the stranger remained kneeling. His silver eyes never left hers. For the first time since meeting him, he finally spoke. His voice was deep and calm, carrying a sadness that felt older than memory itself. No one has spoken that name in over 600 years. Evelyn's breath caught. 600 years. The number felt impossible, yet somehow it did not feel wrong. The stranger offered a faint smile touched by wonder. I searched for answers in every kingdom, every archive, every forgotten ruin. His gaze softened. I never imagined the answer would find me. The winter wind swept gently through the valley. Behind them, the ancient stone arch shimmered once more. The symbols carved into its surface glowed faintly beneath the falling snow. And for the first time since her exile began, Evelyn no longer felt lost. Because somewhere between the dreams, the forgotten symbols, and the name no one remembered, she had finally stepped onto the path that had been waiting for her all along.